From the Digital Media Center, on the campus of Southern Oregon University in Ashland, Oregon. This is Ramping Up Your English, an educational program for intermediate-level English language learners. Here's your host for Ramping Up Your English, John Letz.
Welcome to Ramping Up Your English. This is episode 118, and as you know, if you've watched us for a while, Ramping Up Your English is for intermediate English learners. Now, what that means is it's for people learning English, but they've already taken those first steps. They're past the beginner stage, and they're working to get their English language skills, their proficiency, a bit higher, and that's what this is about. Now, what we do is we take a content-based approach to helping people elevate their level of English proficiency. And part of that approach means using thematic units. And the thematic unit we're using right now is called Native Americans. Now, we've been on the Native American unit for quite some time. And in our last episode, we did a switch. We did a transition, I would say, from the long history and prehistory, some of it, pretty hard to take with all the violence that was involved. But now we've shifted to more life ways of Native Americans. And so this episode, 118, is about food, Native American food. Now I'm standing in this forest, which is in the territory of the Takelma. And I can just imagine that it would be easy to believe that somewhere around here, some Takelma hunter was able to find a deer and bring that back to their family for food. And there's probably all kind of things that could be gathered in this forest to help feed their families and their community. Well, let's learn more about Native American food in our featured video. Let's watch. Have you ever wondered what Native Americans eat? Well, it depends on a great many factors. We humans are omnivores, getting nutrients from both plants and animals. For many Native Americans on the West Coast, acorns provide an important staple food. In much of California, American Indians could be seen digging up roots and collecting acorns. Those acorns were carefully stored for food during the cold winter months. These granaries kept the acorns off the ground and sheltered to keep them dry. The Ahwahneechee in Yosemite depended on acorns to get them through the extreme cold of winter. They descended to the oak groves to collect and then store the acorns. The meal was removed from the shell and ground to a powder. You can still find rocks where this took place. Turning acorns into food is an experience that children had during Ashland's Salmon Festival in 2019.
Unless they're starving, they don't store that well because they don't have tannins in them. They're also bland compared to you can also add acorns like cherry. And the thing is that they would use.
Another staple food for people in the West is harvested by digging up the roots, the camas. Camas meadows were important stops on seasonal rounds for tribes as diverse as the Takelma and the Nez Perce. Vesper Meadow is one of those places, according to Janine Moy.
The earliest anecdote we have about this place, the headwaters of the creek here that was formerly known as Dead Indian Creek, now known as Latgawa Creek, was from a text written by John Harrington. He interviewed a Latgawa elder around the turn of the century, and Molly Orton, she said near the headwaters of Dead Indian Creek, there's a favorite camas digging meadow called Tinth. And it's very likely that that is this meadow or this meadow and a neighboring one. So it signifies what you can tell after being on this land for a while, that this is a very important food place, and it has been a very important food place for a long time. And camas, among hundreds of plants, is a staple food for the people of this region.
Pine nuts, known as piñons, provided nourishment for many bands of the Paiutes. They became a major factor in the way some Paiutes planned their activities. Various seeds and nuts rounded out the diets of Native Americans, and they carefully managed the areas where this food was collected. Tools for grinding and milling such foods are often found where communities process seeds and nuts, making a type of flour to make mush or enrich other food. Food sources were often spread out among sites in a tribe's territory. This kept people moving during the warmer months, planned carefully to gather berries when they were ripe. Berries could be used to dye fabric, but could also be dried and then used to sweeten food or to make into tea.
I liked it.
Tending and collecting food became gathering events, meetups for various communities, becoming social gatherings. Janine Moy explains.
After talking to some local archaeologists and building relationships with tribal members, we know that there are various walking trails that came up from the valley, the Rogue Valley, and were kind of these conduits for people to come in the summer for gathering of food plants, for tending those food crops. You might think of them as native gardens up here. And Takilma people, Latgawa people, Klamath, Shasta would, probably come up in here, tend these native gardens, do, trade, and a lot of these walking trails connect into each other. So it, for sure, like I said, was an important food place and part of kind of seasonal rounds for people of Southern Oregon.
To many indigenous Americans, the staff of life is corn. From today's Mexico and Central America to Mississippian cities like Spiro, cultivating corn meant practicing agriculture. Corn was the foundation for much urbanization, but it was also the basis for spiritual life. In some American Indian cultures, cultivating corn was a sacred act, carried out only by the most esteemed women. Processing the corn was also carried out by women, like grinding it up to make a stew. The skills in feeding the community were passed down to children who learned from their mothers the methods involved.
They eat nassamp, which is hot corn porridge. They sweeten their nassamp with berries.
This ancient food is still enjoyed today, every time we eat a tortilla. In the upper Midwest region of the United States, wild rice was harvested using canoes. As with corn, the rice, or monomum, was processed and stored for later consumption. Before the arrival of Europeans, the Americas were blessed with an abundance of wild animals, a source of protein whether eaten fresh or preserved for winter survival. On the Great Plains of North America, the bison, buffalo, provided this nutrition and so much more. These herd animals evolved to thrive in most of North America, but the Great Plains is where coevolution and adaptation
is easiest to see. The introduction of horses gave a huge advantage to human hunters, yet hunting was mostly balanced with the well-being of the buffalo, and nothing was wasted. The use of buffalo jumps reached back before horses were mastered, and now hunting from horseback became a widespread practice. The meat was processed so it could be preserved and feed the community during the bitter cold winters on the Great Plains. Chokeberries were gathered and mixed with buffalo jerky to make a high-energy portable food for hunters and trappers who traveled great distances from home. Families were unlikely to survive winter without the nourishment of buffalo meat. Starvation was imposed on tribes of the plains by policy of the U.S. government. Millions of buffalo were killed for their hides and their bones, pushing them close to extinction. Today, the government is returning buffalo to Native American communities on reservations as their populations rebound. As they reestablish themselves in the safety provided by tribes, their nourishment of the people is of a spiritual nature. Giving them refuge and welcome is the highest priority. Food can wait. Since time immemorial, animals have sustained American Indians, and for many have determined the seasonal rounds that kept them in motion. Pits were dug and covered to trap deer and elk along stream banks, resulting in the name Pit River Indians for tribes in Northern California. Abundant wildlife rewarded societies where hunting skills were highly prized, and meat became a central food in the diet. From coast to coast, various species of deer both fed and clothed Native Americans. Other animal resources were more localized. Caribou and moose fed many people in the northern reaches of North America. Those who lived on the edge of the continent got much of their food from the ocean. Rivers meant food for early Americans. In the Pacific Northwest, that meant salmon. Salmon swam hundreds of miles inland in order to spawn. Along the way, people await, as do bears, kept alive by the nourishing meat of the salmon. To reach inland spawning grounds, salmon swim up rivers like the mighty Columbia, feeding people at Celilo Falls. Fishing platforms are still passed down in families, although the thundering falls are now submerged because of dams. While fish runs are much smaller than in the past, people still find places to fish, like this old navigation lock on the Columbia. Along the west coast, salmon return to smaller streams as well, like the Rogue River. Tributaries like Little Butte Creek still provide spawning beds. Fish traps were used as one way of catching salmon. Regardless of the fishing methods, returning salmon were always welcomed with songs, dances, ceremony, and prayers. Only then was the salmon prepared for a feast for the whole community, and often for guests as well.
When you cook that way, the oil from the belly area runs down through the fish, and so it keeps it moist and gives it lots of flavor.
Along with the feast celebrating the salmon's return, the meat is smoked for preserving. This way the salmon can nourish the people during the winter, when spawning runs are no longer active. This activity can be seen throughout the Pacific Northwest. So can salmon fishing, seen here in Northern California. Sometimes attached to salmon, lamprey eels also provided an important and much enjoyed food source. From animals large and small, Native Americans fed their families through hunting, gathering, and for some, agriculture. As for what to eat and what not to eat, differences between tribes could lead to sharp conflict, as explained by Mandy Yepaw.
We have like very distinct cultural differences. Like there was a big Comanche Kiowa fight over whether or not to eat bears. To the Kiowa people, bears are sacred, and their word for bear in language is actually kind of a modification of man. So they see themselves as closely related to bears, like a bear is their relative. They would not eat a bear. The Comanches, they did eat bear. In fact, my own Comanche grandpa killed a bear on his property in Grants Pass, and that's the one time I ate bear was with my Comanche grandpa. So for my husband, like that's a big no-no. Right? So, and it's funny, but I didn't know that, right? I didn't know, my husband Thomas is telling me about this history of between the Kiowa and the Comanches and how they had this big fight about whether or not to eat bears. And it's just funny, like it fits, right? Because I think, oh yeah, like I did eat bear with my Comanche grandpa. Like that's true. Like that's interesting. That would never happen in a Kiowa family. Never ever.
Whatever is okay to eat and whatever is taboo, native foods today are not easy to come by. Mandy Yepaw explains the concept of food sovereignty.
Is a really big thing that people can learn a lot from about, and food sovereignty is just, having access and control to your own foodways and not being dependent on a grocery store or a mass producer, which we've also seen with recalls and E. coli outbreaks and things like that. That doesn't happen when you have true food sovereignty, where you have more control over where your food is coming from and how it's getting to you.
Networks now exist for Native Americans to gain access to the food they need.
Became a project that we now call the Indigenous Gardens Network, and it's led by members of the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde and Confederated Tribes of Letz. And primarily, we have had phone calls over Zoom since it's been developing since the pandemic. And a lot of the discussion is around food sovereignty, allowing for tribal members to have access to first foods and their ancestral foods, connecting with the land and having access to places that, they originated from, and developing relationships with land managers.
There are negative health effects from inadequate nutrition, a well-known issue where Native Americans are concerned. Mandy Yepaw explains the connection between those outcomes and food sovereignty.
Some of those things are true, like especially with the health outcomes, but it's not because genetically we have those health outcomes. It's because our way of life has been disturbed, where we had a really healthy lifestyle of of eating from the land and living off the land and moving around. My husband's tribe, most tribes roamed around, especially like even our local tribes. They didn't just stay in one place. They moved up and down the river fishing, and they had a winter camp and they had a summer camp and they had a fall camp. Everyone was constantly moving around. The other, like the Midwest tribes, they were following the buffalo around. So when the United States came in and made everyone stick to these small reservations, that really hurt our health and our way of life and our way of living. So it's just important understanding like where this stuff is coming from, that we're not genetically predisposed to have bad health outcomes. It's because, you know, we're stuck in these like food deserts, like on the Navajo reservation where there's no grocery stores, you know, you can't get fresh food.
The menu for Native Americans depended on the food sources where they lived and their skills in obtaining, preparing, and storing food. As for what most Native Americans eat in our time, just look at your own menu. And if you're lucky enough to visit a powwow, Indian fry bread. Of course, there's much more to learn about traditional foods of Native Americans. With steady effort and goodwill, some foods from the past are becoming available again. While not all of the past foods may even be wanted, the freedom to choose should belong to the Native Americans themselves.
People need to understand that all of North America is indigenous land, it is native land. People tend to forget that there was a vibrant native culture living in all parts of North America, and food is really the piece that's going to help us move forward into a brighter future. My name is Sean Sherman, and I am a chef. I own the company The Sous Chef. So this is going to be 2 pieces per plate for these. Our mission is revitalizing Native American foods and re-identifying North American cuisine. We've tried really hard to maintain authenticity by removing all of the colonial ingredients like dairy, wheat flour, processed sugar, beef, pork, chicken, and we're just using a lot of wild game, a lot of the native agricultural heirloom varietals, a lot of the wild foods around us, and really making those plates that taste like a region. Most of these ingredients are very familiar to people, but the usage of a lot of the wild plants really talk about a place and a community. We prioritize purchasing from the indigenous vendors first because we really want to open up a lot of opportunity for indigenous people growing out farms or collecting things from the wild or raising animals. So for the big dinner, we're actually cooking this bison down with a bunch of fresh cedar and some bergamot. We will purchase from anybody raising these indigenous pieces because it is such an important part of the landscape and the history.
You know you want it.
As we travel around the country, we like to make dinners and foods that really represent those areas. What's great about being able to do these dinners, especially in non-Indigenous communities, is just to bring awareness.
This kind of food that we're eating today, like, you're gonna feel really good when you leave here. You're not gonna feel heavy and weighted down. You're gonna feel energized and just happy because you're knowing where this food is coming from.
We feel like anybody across North America will benefit from the understanding of the Indigenous food systems around you, and it's all gonna help us move forward.
Well, that's about it for episode 118. We'll see you next time for Ramping Up Your English. Thanks for watching. I'm John Letz.
You've been watching Ramping Up Your English, a support program for intermediate-level English language learners. Learn more. Visit our website at letscreate.org. You can also watch or download today's program at archive.org/details/roadtv. Join us next time on RBTV Voices for Ramping Up Your English.